Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session of CME Palooza Spring. I'm Derek Warnick, one of the CME Palooza co-producers, along with Scott Cover. I'm going to bring up the slides so you can all see those. Great. So our second session of the day is including patients and patient advocacy groups in educational planning and delivery, how to make it a win-win. And our session is sponsored by Forefront Collaborative, and our moderator today is Catherine Pucci, Senior Vice President of Platform Q Health. Before I turn things over to Catherine, of course, everyone's favorite part of CME Palooza, the reading of the sponsors. Yes, we're going to do this before every single session, so settle in. I'll try to go through them fast. Our gold sponsors, big thank you to Genentech and ACHL. Our silver sponsors, ASIM, Forefront Collaborative, Educational Measures, Medscape Education, and Peer Audience. And our bronze sponsors, I am likely to say somebody's name wrong. I apologize in advance. It's traditional. Catamount Medical Education, Clinical Care Options, CMEology, Creative Educational Concepts, Global Education Group, Helio Education Lab, Impact Education, Infograph Ed, Prime Ed, Primary Care Network, Real CME, RedMed Ed, ArmyI, Viator, I think Scott tells me this is pronounced, Medical Communications, VMC, and Vindico. As always, there are three ways that you can ask questions during our session. You can use the Educational Measures text line to send in a question, 267-6660-CME. 0263. You can also click on the Google slide link found on the live page. Make sure you click the one beside my name, not the one beside Scott's. I am Derek. And three, you can tweet your questions using the CME Palooza hashtag. I'll be monitoring all these various ways for the questions and then giving them to our panel. Our speaker disclosure is that the opinions, discussions, and or conclusions of our presenters are our own or their own and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, its parent company, or affiliates. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Catherine. Take it away.
Hi, thanks, Derek. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to CME Palooza. Today's 1-hour session is called Including Patients and Patient Advocacy Groups in Educational Planning, How to Make It a Win-Win. We have three guest panelists today. I will be the moderator. I am the Senior Vice President of Education at Platform Q, Catherine Pucci. We're going to be joined today by Sarah Klug. She's Executive Director of Cancer 101 and the Director of Participatory, I forgot what it was. Anyway, Cancer 101's mission is to empower cancer patients and caregivers to take control of their diagnosis and to engage in their care. We're joined by Alan Dwatterlin, Executive Vice President of External Affairs, Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. The DBSA is a national education advocacy and support organization representing the needs, concerns, and contributions of people who live with depression and bipolar disorder. And our third speaker this morning will be Christian Rubio. Christian is the Vice President of Marketing at Platform Q. And Platform Q is a leader of online, virtual, and enduring patient education and professional education programs that produce outcome-centric outcomes. So we look forward to the next hour and our panelists.
And Catherine, if I can interrupt really quick, I forgot, I wanted to mention that Sarah is with us, and she is not just standing very still, but we can't get Sarah's video to work, but we can hear her fine, and you can see her picture. And we also have a few little built-ins along the way during this presentation, so some may take a second or two to get set up, so just bear with us as we go through, but it'll be great. Okay.
Okay, so let's begin. Again, I'm Catherine Pucci, and I'd like to give you a little overview of what today's presentation will be. I'm going to read the abstract that we presented, so we'll get all in the same frame of what we're going to discuss today. We know that CME providers are increasingly moving towards the inclusion of patients and patient advocacy groups in their HCP and patient-directed educational activities. It's clear to many why this is a win for the educational providers. But what can patients and patient advocates gain from taking part in these collaborations? We'll run through several true case scenarios with our panel presenters, and through that process, hear their take on the value they perceive to gain through lending their voice to HCP and patient programs. So I want to say welcome to the panelists. Sarah, Alan, and Christian, thanks so much. I look forward to the next hour to hear all of your experiences. I want to say welcome to everybody out there. Feel free to write in some questions as we move forward. Excuse me. We're going to be speaking for an hour live. Each one of our speakers will speak for about 15 minutes and share some real life case studies. We're going to talk about some challenges and successes. And I think at the end, we can address as many questions as we can. So before we move on to our panelists, I just wanted to take a moment just to talk a little bit about patient engagement. I think we all can agree that it's very important to have patient engagement early, to get patients' voice to participate in all of our initiatives as we move forward. If we empower our patients, we're going to find out through education that they become their own best advocates to take care of their diseases. I think this group here today is going to talk about a little bit of their educational designs that they've created, some decision tools, some decision aids that they've used, having the patient voice in the forefront of the design. Here at Platform Q, what we found to be very successful is to join with our patient advocacy groups. We're finding that if we have patients and caregivers on our panels, helping us design our educational initiatives, we're getting better patient outcomes. So today we're going to explore the working practices that are lending the patient voice to HCP programs and to patient-centric programs. Clearly, the patient voice is invaluable to HCP programs. What I'm talking about is if we get the patient involved early in research, if we get the patient involved early in clinical trials, during treatment, we will see better outcomes. So the whole point is to make sure we have the patient and the caregiver's voice heard in everything that we do. So we're going to move forward now, and I'm going to ask, what are some of the benefits that we do see by having the patient's voice heard? So Sarah, I want to introduce Sarah, the founder of the Health Collaboratory, the CEO of Cancer 101, the executive director of the Society for Participatory Medicine. Sarah wears a lot of hats, so we're really pleased she took some time out of her very busy schedule to speak with us today. Hi, Sarah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
So as Catherine alluded to, I represent a few organizations, and I'll get into the details shortly. So I represent 3 patient advocacy organizations. Cancer 101 supports 100,000 patients annually, mainly those that are newly diagnosed, and we work through our network of 1,200 hospitals and community practices. Executive director of the Society for Participatory Medicine, which mainly serves the expert patient, very active in policy and advocacy. You see the NORD logo there. That's the National Organization for Rare Disorders. So I'm on the board. But that's an umbrella organization to hundreds of smaller rare disease advocacy organizations. And these are examples of 3 very different patient advocacy organizations that have varying priorities. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The average person affected by a condition doesn't necessarily go to a patient advocacy organization for support or education, even if they participate in a run or an event. It's the main reason the Health Collaboratory was founded, and the Health Collaboratory is an innovation hub that's focused on amplifying the voice of the average patient and caregiver who might not be on social media, who might need coaching, who are much harder to find, but they're often an overlooked voice in healthcare. And it's time we gave them the mic if we try in healthcare to accommodate the actual needs of people affected by various conditions. So where are the opportunities? Many of you have been focused on healthcare professionals. Recently, there's been a greater emphasis on the patient in the medical education arena. But guess what? Patient ed has been around for decades. And although this is somewhat of a new arena for the medical education industry, this is not a new area for healthcare. And there are many established organizations whose primary role is to develop education and support for patients across diseases, which I encourage you to explore and potentially partner with as you work on developing your strategies. There are many nuances that go into the development of effective patient ed strategies that vary from traditional medical education. Whether it's the roller coaster of emotions, the life circumstances, they all have an effect on motivation to learn and engagement. And on top of that, there's so much out there. 11 million hits come up if I search on cancer patient education alone. Information overload's a growing problem with an overwhelming amount of information available to patients and caregivers, which has caused frustration. In fact, information overload has been linked to anxiety and poor health. So then where is the opportunity? How do we avoid to the clutter? So the third pathway here is what I call, if you can go back, participatory education. And this is what I consider the sweet spot for the medical education industry. This is where we teach the clinician how to best educate and engage the patient. When is the right time to educate the patient? What are some of the effective resources that are already out there that can be leveraged? When should these be introduced? What are some of the support vehicles available to address barriers? This isn't the type of medical education the clinician typically receives, and in a sense, it's a new way of practicing medicine. So this is where I see opportunity for MedEd. Next slide, please. So now, as we explore this third bucket, which partners should we think about engaging? The big trend right now, again, is how do we include the voice of the patient? But it's important to take a step back and reflect on, well, why do we want to include the voice of the patient? So that this isn't a checkbox exercise. What role do you want them to play? What type of patient do you want to include in your initiative? There are a few buckets here to consider, and I'll start at the bottom of this pyramid, which is where actually most begin. Patient advocacy organizations. Their remit is to provide support services to patients and their caregivers. They can be formal 501c3 organizations that may advocate for patient rights, and formal consortiums, or even small online communities organized around a hashtag. There's a certain type of patient that will belong to an advocacy organization, and that's important to take into account as you identify your partners. There are also individual patient advocates who may not be affiliated with an organization. They might be active on social media. They might go to different conferences and speak about their experiences. They may or may not actually have the condition that they're advocating for, but based on experiences may turn this into their primary line of work. Then there are patients who may not have intersected with anyone in healthcare other than their healthcare team. This is the average person affected by a condition. They receive a diagnosis, they may search online for information, they get education from their clinician, but they may never connect with an advocacy organization, trying to get busy living. These patients are harder to find, but they're an important piece of the puzzle, as are the patients who, as are the caregivers who often help support the patient, whether it's a family member, a friend, even a paid helper. So as you consider involving a patient, of how you truly want them to engage, what role you want them to play, and then consider the type of patient you need so that they're well aligned with your ultimate goal. Next slide, please. So let's get into some specific examples and initiatives. I spoke a bit about the average person affected by a condition that we engage through the Health Collaboratory. The Patient Shark Tank was created to amplify the voice of the patient and caregiver in the design, development, and/or continuous improvement of healthcare innovation, whether it's education, technology, research design. It could be an innovation in concept mode or something that's been out there for years and needs a bit of an update. They also participate in grant review. And although there are expert patients and caregivers who are part of this tribe, the majority of patients and their caregivers have never intersected with players in the healthcare ecosystem. Others are coached on how to reflect on their personal stories and experiences as they provide perspectives or partner on the development of innovations. If you go to the next slide, please. So the build of an online patient Shark Tank is underway to allow for patients and caregivers who are unable to travel, uncomfortable in a life setting or large crowd, or maybe work full-time, to also have a voice. And I've personally run every single initiative that I've developed over the years through the Patient Shark Tank, and sometimes the same initiative more than once as we work on continuous improvement. So there are over 16,275 patients and caregivers across conditions that are part of the Patient Shark Tank. 12-part scorecard that they use to evaluate some of the initiatives distills down into a 3-part score around engagement, value, and credibility. And feel free to reach out if you'd like more information on the Patient Shark Tank. So here's a snapshot of the Patient Shark Tank in action with a year-long curriculum we worked on with Harvard Med School, where we worked on a co-design project with over 40 innovators, and the patients and caregivers were integrated into the program every step had 4 patient shark tanks made up of different patients and caregivers as checkpoints to provide perspective on the innovations that were created by the 8 teams involved. Next slide, please. So this is an example of an initiative that was focused on the third pathway we discussed earlier, participatory education. This activity leveraged our prescription to learn model, where we tied it to a CME activity that was focused on educating the clinician on emerging science and treatment pathways, but then also taught the clinician how to educate the patient and caregiver on their options and engage them in making a shared decision. From there, the clinician prescribed resources we recommended to the patient and caregiver, and we were able to understand if the patient filled the information prescription, how long it took for them to fill it, and what their information seeking and navigation behaviors were above and beyond that specific resource. We have feedback loops built in where, with the patient's permission, we can loop back with the clinician so they can understand what was most effective and where there were issues. Next slide, please. So here are a few screens from the Prescription to Learn platform. You can get a flavor of how it's integrated. In this case, the clinician was able to prescribe resources and support based on specific barriers, whether it was cost of care or work-related issues or feeling alone, for example. So the next slide, I'll show you some data. So from the Health Match pilot that we did, we found that 82% of patients advised that the cost of care resources helped alleviate health-related financial burden. 68% cited that cost of care was a reason they didn't take their medication as prescribed. 74% advised that the resources to help address loneliness provided a source of support. 81% of the caregiver resources helped alleviate emotional burden and anxiety. And I'll just skip through some of these real quick. 68% advised that the legal resources provided support around disability rights, and 72% advised that the child care resources were utilized and helped them with access to and from treatment. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to walk you quickly, give you a Prescription to Learn platform that we launched in cancer. It was recognized as a best practice under the Cancer Moonshot under former VP Biden, and we're now working on other conditions. And here's where we practice what we preach. And rather than develop new patient education, we actually curated some of the best resources from credible organizations as a starting point. And then we co-designed a platform with patients and caregivers so that they can access and rate these resources. And the goal here is the back-end data where we're able to generate where we can understand the most effective types of resources based upon the phase in the journey. So here the patient would plug in their condition, what condition you need information on. They click on breast cancer, for example. Next slide. They click on their phase of the journey. Do they want prevention information, newly diagnosed, treatment, long-term management? Next slide. From there, they can select the type of resource they want. Do they want a hotline, an app, an online community, a book, a brochure? Next slide. And so here's where they then access the resources based upon their search parameters. They can see how other patients and clinicians have rated it. But we've also developed a tool that allows people to understand how they might take in information and whether they might be linguistic, auditory, or visual, recognizing we can be multimodal. And here's where they can actually filter the resources in the system by a potential preference. Next slide. And then this is where we tie it back to medical education activities, where a clinician can actually prescribe resources through the system. They can personalize it by patients, and then they can see where the patient has filled the prescription and then what their information seeking patterns and navigation behaviors are above and beyond. Next slide. So we had 125 patients and caregivers involved in co-designing the platform, 22 clinicians, 58 advocacy partners, 4 academic medical centers, and 18 content experts. We have over 28,000 patients using the system today. And this is independent of the closed loop system that we have in place that I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide. Into some of the data around the system. So although Prescription to Learn is open to the public, independently, we've worked with several health systems and hospitals where we've white labeled the system for their patients, caregivers, and clinicians. And this allows them to house and track the effectiveness of their specific resources and support systems and generate metrics and data that matters most to them, that ties back to many of their mandates internally. No, if you go back to the last slide, I'm just gonna, so current data, 93% acted upon information prescriptions provided by the clinician, 92% understood the content and found it easy to use, 94% advised that the resource simplified a problem or addressed a question they had, and 89% learned something new that helped them make a decision. If you go to the next slide, please. This is leukemia-specific data where 62% were able to troubleshoot a symptom they were experiencing with information they learned from the site. 84% of the patients asked their clinician questions based on resources they accessed. And then of those patients prescribed resources by comfortable asking specific questions about treatment options because the clinician had prescribed information. Next slide. So again, leukemia specific, this was tied to a medical education activity where 1,185 patients and caregivers logged into the system. 904 visited the site more than once without any additional prompts. And then 72 clinicians as part of that activity prescribed resources to their patients and caregivers. There's a back-end continuum built into the site called a Meaningful Partnership Continuum, recognizing that an informational resource is very different than a resource that's geared towards helping a patient or caregiver make a decision. And so this is a seven-phase continuum that's tied to Prescription to Learn to allow us to understand the types of resources patients are gravitating towards and when. And so based upon that Meaningful Partnership Continuum, we were able to understand that 91% of clinicians prescribed informational resources, but 77% of the patients' caregivers actually searched for motivational resources. And then patients and caregivers expressed a desire for the clinician to prescribe resources to help them make decisions around their care. Next slide, please. So we got into some of the specifics here around the closed loop system, feedback loops with the academic medical centers. We talked about the patient shark tested resources. We talked about the Meaningful Partnership Continuum. And again, an important point to make there is that it's critical that we take into account the right resource at the right time. We're working on scales to measure the impact of the intervention in a consistent way. And so if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about some of the summary points. So for those who know me, it's no surprise I had to weave in some fashion advice here. Trend is not always your friend. There are certain from and others we can adapt into our lifestyle based upon strengths and weaknesses. I'm still talking about fashion here, but similarly, just because inclusion of the patient voice is the hot trend right now, doesn't mean we should jump into it head on. Take the time to learn how best to integrate the patient voice into your strategy based on your strengths and weaknesses. Clearly define your goals. Do you want just feedback? Do you want a true partnership? Be transparent with your objectives so that you can manage expectations of your partner. What do they hope to get out of it? If you truly want to partner, don't just show components on a need-to-know basis. When you think about what your partner may get out of it, is it sharing their individual experiences? Do they want to integrate their resources into your activity? Do they really want to collaborate on every element from start to finish? Be clear from the beginning. And then also think about what type of patient do you want to include, and from there you should be set. And for those who don't know, I'm a problem solver, so if you hit any roadblocks as you try to engage patients or advocacy organizations, just shoot me a note. Thank you.
Great, Sarah, thank you. You guys are doing some excellent work. I'm sure the participants will want to maybe see some of your tools. I'm sure if they can contact you, you can share some of the information. It's wonderful in showing the power of patience and engagement. Thanks so much. We're going to turn our attention to Alan Duartolo now from the DBSA. Alan, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Hi.
So go ahead, Alan. We'll allow you. Tell us what's in it for the DBSA.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go ahead and take over the slides myself. So pardon me while I share my screen.
Perfect.
Y'all can see it. That's very well.
You got it.
I'm very glad to be with you all today, and I am Alan Doederlein with the Depression Alliance. Very honored to be here, and I want to say a bit about what we at DBSA have done in terms of CME and other educational initiatives, and why it's beneficial to us to partner with CME providers and the sponsors that contract with them. So this is all about what's in it for us. I hope this will provide a roadmap, though, for anyone listening so that you can hopefully engage in meaningful, impactful partnerships and do a great job educating folks and getting lots of business. So what we're going to cover today is a bit about DBSA, so you know who the heck we are. And we're great to partner with, and mental health is health. So bear us in mind, as they say. We're going to talk about a program we did called Concord, and it was all around medication and the Therapeutic Alliance. And so that's an example of the kind of educational initiative that we're capable of. And finally, I'll outline the win-win. And again, hope that this will allow for you to better understand the perspective on the other side of the desk, as it were. My organization, I'm very proud to work for. We are the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, and we are by and for people who have lived experience of depression and bipolar disorder. That lived experience informs everything that we do. We have chapters, and they provide free in-person peer support, reaching about 50,000 people in person. When combined with our online, print, and other educational resources like the one I'll highlight today, along with our social media and other events and programs, reach over 4 million people. And what we do really is inspire wellness. I was at a DBSA conference and had a person who was attending the conference say to me, you know, until I attended this, no one ever told me I could be well. And hard, of course, but it also made me so proud because the organization that is helping people understand that people with depression and bipolar disorder do live extraordinary lives. It's possible, but you have to get the right treatment and find the right way to manage your condition. So that's what we're all about. And in terms of who we serve people who have depression and bipolar disorder, and that makes sense. Serve the communities that they live in, where they are, and that extends to what I mentioned before. Today we're going to education, and so that's where systems come in. We want to have an influence on the various systems that influence people's health. So that includes, of course, clinical interactions, it includes hospitals, it includes schools, it includes payers, as I'm sure all of you know, a very diverse, even Byzantine system. And we are about system transformation. And then finally, the whole darn world, society. We're looking to change the conversation about one of danger and drain to one of collaboration and contrast. So individual wellness. Within communities, we cultivate connections. With systems, we catalyze transformation. In society, we inspire understanding. Okay, well, so what does that mean, right? Empower Wellness is our tools and resources, yeah, but also what they provide. That I shared about the person who said, nobody ever told me I could well. You have to be empowered and have agency in order to make progress in your health. And that's true of any health area, again, as I'm sure we all know. So empowering wellness is where I think our educational and information, cultivating connections. You can't do this alone. Any health condition is going to need the support of families, of friends, of teachers, of officials. And so we really need to create those understanding and proactive and positive connections in order to help people to live well in the world. It's one thing to feel well on your own, inside your own mind and body, but you also have to be with people. That's essential to living a full life. Whoops, what did I do? Sorry, everybody.
You're good. You're good. You got it.
And that'll give me a chance to clear my throat. I totally have a cold, everybody, so I normally sound much better. So then Mariah Carey. Catalyzing transformation. That's really where we deal with access to care, quality of care. So that deals with, do you have that allows you to actually get in to see a doctor, and that's a very multiple facets. Then we've got the quality of the healthcare you receive. Are you evidence-based, measurement-based care? And unfortunately, the answer is not always yes to that question. And then in terms of inspiring this is a set of illnesses that have a lot of misconceptions. The most glaring one is every time we have one of these horrible tragedies that occur, the first question is, well, was there a mental health issue? And I think that's because we don't have a language for it. We can't comprehend these and that's got to be a mental illness, right? Well, it may be. I don't know, and I'm not a diagnostician. That's not for me to say. It certainly seems like it is a problem, but it's not the same as the diagnosable mental health conditions within the DSM-5. These are the thing. You are no more likely to commit a violent act if you have depression than you are if you have diabetes or high blood pressure. That is, I think we need to dismantle some of the stigma around, and then also the idea that if you have a mental health condition, you're always going to be sick. You can't work. You can't have a full life. That's absolutely want to really inspire people to get away from that kind of thinking. So what we're talking about today, I think, really aligns with empowerment of wellness and the catalyzation of transformation. That's where I think we get to the individuals who are the patient on work, and then that's where we get to the providers, who are essential part, the front lines of care in healthcare systems. So that's where we're going to focus most of our attention today as I talk about our Concordance project. So this is from a while ago. 12, excuse me. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. But what are you going to do? So the Concordance program was really about collaboration, about how do you effectively communicate and make reasonable decisions as quickly as possible. So you have a ton of information, both on the clinician and the patient side, and it's a lot to process. And you have the challenges on the side of the clinician, electronic medical registration, the various hoops you have to jump through, not to mention the getting CMEs, why we're all in business, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on. It can feel chaotic. Then, in the lives of people who have mental health conditions and mood disorders, perhaps bipolar disorder especially, you can have a lot of chaos in your life, and you have motivation and issues. It's literally hard, everything that's going on. In a situation like that, where there's so much noise all around, it's really is that you have the best possible success. That was what we were thinking of when we created this program. Two distinct goals. One is for people with mental health, so that they really expect and demand that the end goal is getting better. Only part of a tumor, and similarly, just mild but manageable depression in the case of mood disorders. So we really want to raise that bar on both the patient and the clinician side. There can be a resignation or the low expectation. But we also wanted to really encourage and instill a call to action for measurement. Certain clinicians are using measurements of progress. They are using scales in the interviews that they do. Sometimes it is, and other times it is based on evidence. And the thing is, if you don't have record what it shows, and then use it with the person you're treating, not working towards the same goal. You don't have a carrot in front of you going for it. And so to transform practice, transform expectation. This came together over, so it was a collaboration, as you see. It was us representing the patient voice. And we said, well, we really want to have a clinician space. So we brought in the International Bipolar Disorders. And then we also noticed that, you know, if we're reaching clinicians primarily, you know, this was a program for plan providers, but we knew that we wanted to reach more clinicians. And that was certainly one of the sponsors of the program, and that was well known to the facilitator. And it's not a secret, the sponsors were Janssen and Company and Eli Lilly and Company, the clinicians, as well as finally, we wanted to bring in a respected thought leader and something with some gravitas that would make people say, oh, I've always wanted to hear that gal or guy talk. And so we partnered with the Collaborative Care Initiative, which is a company and an initiative by Gary Sachs, who is a leading world-renowned researcher in the area of mood disorders, an accomplished clinician, and thankfully, a member of the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance Scientific Advisory Board, as well as our governing board. So we had, you know, many players. We had sort of the, you know, CME provider at the core, kind of traffic cop, the fundamental of the sponsor, because I think that that's, you know, that's important. You want to achieve that aim. And then really as collaborators, patients, a group of clinicians, and a person to challenge and also synthesize the various points of view. So those, and we came up with a program that we did webinar, but also stream that, and the panel was a group of clinicians who have personal experience of bipolar in this case, people who are family caregivers, multiple points of view. And it was moderated by Gary Sachs. And what we wanted to convey is that, you know, in this condition, we can have confusion about what treatment to pursue. And we also have health area a problem with adherence and our assertion with this program was, well, complying is an antiquated term. We don't talk about complying with treatment, and I think we all get why that's. But you definitely have a better shot with adherence. You're adhering to a regimen. Well, I don't know. I think we can all relate to, okay, I'm going to adhere to my, you know, new initiative to have more fruits and vegetables and not drink, or I'm going to adhere to my new exercise program. That adherence can sometimes feel like a burden. Concordance is really about being to the best possible choice in your given circumstances. It makes a collaboration part of what you're doing, and it also necessitates measurement-based care. How will you know that you've made the right decision? How will you know that you may need to adjust that decision if you're not measuring things? Thesis, we shared some procedural tools and process areas, and then we showed our results with some case studies. Very well-received program, and it exists on the DBSA website, dbsalliance.org/concordance. But I want to highlight some of the things that I think made this really
Alan, did we lose you? I think we lost Alan.
Okay.
He was close to the end anyway. Alan, if you can hear me, log off and then come back on, and we'll move on to Christian.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Alan. So we'll move on to Christian Rubio, the Vice President of Platform Q. And if we get back Alan, we'll re-engage with Alan. Hi, Christian.
Hi. How's everybody doing? Hope everyone's great out there. Just a little introduction about myself and Platform Q Health. I oversee, as Kathy put it, kind of marketing activities for Platform Q Health, which includes audience generation and distribution of our education programs across our digital network of over a dozen therapeutically aligned HCP channels and a growing lineup of patient and caregiver channels. Really kind of co-designing our programming with our collaborators and partners to fit the learning format and style of our respective audiences. Reflecting back on what Sarah said at the beginning, we really view education and engaging the patients and the voice and using the voice of the patient in programming kind of depending on the type of program we're trying to do in the form of CME, where there's increased presence and role of the patient, as well as in kind of aligned and integrated education, which includes patient and caregiver, as well as HCP education. And of course, programming dedicated specifically for patients and caregivers to just up-level their knowledge of their own diseases and working with foundations to increase engagement and ownership of their health, as well as helping them even get discovered by more and more patients out there across their respective landscape. Today, I'm going to provide some kind of on-the-ground insights on how to engage therapists.
To over-engineer. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard somebody with a question. Alan.
Hi, Alan. We lost you there for a few minutes.
I'm sorry, what?
Hold on one second. We lost you, so we moved on to Christian because you completely went off. Can you take a pause in your presentation? I'm going to let Christian go, and then we'll come back to you.
Have I been gone for a long time?
About 5 minutes.
What?
We'll come back to you.
Okay, cool.
We'll come back to you though.
Well, I'm gonna make sure we weave back into you. So, I'm going to talk about some on-the-ground insights about how to engage respective disease communities and partners with them, the way we do it at least, and kind of help them achieve their mission through up-leveling outcomes through strategic kind of measurement-focused education efforts. Our approach to working as a platform, as an outcomes platform with patient advocacy groups and disease state education foundations is really to kind of elevate and amplify the group's mission, really being focused around their mission and providing the resources that we can provide to empower the reach and the impact of and engagement of their content. Patient advocacy organizations bring a lot to the table when thinking about this as a win-win. They bring a clarity of mission that really should help the design of education to stay focused on what the big picture is, while also doing the incremental measurable improvements that being sought by the educational program. Bring a certain voice that brings authenticity and empathy and connection with the respective audience that really basically sums up in really kind of maximized trust of the program, which is especially important when it comes to independently funded education, as well as audience, of course. When there's patient and caregiver audience present, or even if it's a larger foundation or group, or even a very targeted one where there are clinicians who are specialists who understand how to help co-design a program, they can bring a lot of experience as far as what's missing, what are the gaps. As we've learned through our kind of venture into patient and caregiver education, the audience is different. The format is absolutely different as far as how they best engage a program. When there isn't a checkbox of continuing education and a certificate necessarily to collect and report, the motivations are different, and you really have to kind of keep that into account all the time when working with them. Yes, the foundation is going to bring that, but you have to bring that in-house and really live that. There's a wide range of health literacy levels. It is not a 1-hour program or a 3-hour program for one specific audience, and that's it. You can do that, but at the same time, serial learning, kind of breaking things down, and being able to, or simply targeting a specific audience segment, whether newly diagnosed or maybe some who are more expert. These are the kinds of elements that we take into account as we evolve our platform for the patient caregiver audience as well. We are really trying to kind of innovate as well on the traditional patient education experience, the journey of self-education and empowerment beyond kind of just websites and pamphlets, really getting them into the flow of education that travels with them at different touch points with their different stakeholders around them in their support network, whether it's how to talk with their family members and peers to how to prepare for a meeting with their specialist or a PCP as part of their care team. Engagement level varies, of course. It's personal, it's not professional. So I'll give an example of kind of where we see additional engagement and leverage that, not just during the core program, but around that program. And of course, as I said before, learners are in different steps of their healthcare journey. So where do you meet them? Where do you focus? We'll talk a little bit about that. And, most importantly, I think Sarah and Alan would really agree on this. They are not just a logo to slap on a grant proposal or an educational program. They are real partners who can really lead you to success. And engaging them that way matters most. For us, we definitely, from the audience generation side and engagement of the core audience side, we talk about fishing where the fish are and really supporting the operational elements of a foundation or of an advocacy organization, not just the education at an academic level. Next slide being a little bit more about our learner journey and where we have kind of built-in feedback loops where we work with our partner organizations. Obviously, at the forefront of this is content planning, content design. There's a proposal that's been submitted, you've gotten funding, you're working together, but before that ever happened, you chose the right partner, you worked together, you gave each other the space and the time to hear each other out and really maximize the potential for that program. And then once you're getting into kind of operational mode, you're still working together and you're still trying to move on. Is this the touch point slide, by the way? Or yeah. Can we go one slide further? Great. So I was just speaking to that first bubble right there, the first call out. As we get into setting up for a program, as folks may know, we focus on live online education that's interactive and expert-led, usually by panels, but then also with an enduring period. We kind of put it out on demand, kind of like a Netflix model. When we're in that pre-session mode, we're in audience generation mode. That's engagement period. That's not just kind of emails and awareness driving, but really starting to build the audience interest and empathy with a variety of tactics. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the content development. And this is actually a program this is a program we ran with Ellen and DBSA about MPD. And this is an example of the agenda being worked out ahead of time, really working together to have the partner really featured in the program, not just in the panel, but really kind of sharing insights along the way that's going to maximize that impact. We prepared patient interviews as kind of my story vignettes. This is an element that we use not only for, we use it in multiple ways to pre-promote and really gain trust and engagement with an audience that sees themselves in the person speaking, whether it's a video snippet on Facebook promoting it or through DBSA's email list. That's also can be used as part of the program. You can cut in and out of those vignettes to bring the conversation of a panel that might be very kind of structured into something that more is like, okay, let's delve deeper, let's talk about it, and it really pulls the audience in. And of course, addressing, you can address some unique perspectives that way. So there are needs, and you have to take into account how you're going to work together, planning it out, really giving each other time to work through what needs to be done to get the right people participating. Ellen was awesome in this case, working with him and his organization, and they were incredibly responsive. And as long as there is clear kind of communication and expectations and timelines, you can make for a great program. So in the pre-session stage of our learning journey, this is where we really kind of start to not only engage the audience, but also start to learn as well. I mean, as a learning organization, we are constantly trying to figure out what's the next level of pushing outcomes and helping our organizations achieve their mission. One of the big ones is pre-session engagement. We put out a cue board, which is essentially a question wall, where the patient audience can, and we actually do this on the CME side as well, the audience can actually post their questions specific to the topic, and allowing for different levels of engagement or people kind of different personality types. Some people may not even feel emboldened, even though it's anonymous, to write their own question, but to be able to upvote the other questions that they see. This puts kind of audience skin in the game, as it were, that really helps improve attendance and engagement and outcomes as a result. The other side of it is the partnering with the organization, we jointly learn about additional gaps and start to see, do we fill it in pre-live session with our panel addressing specific questions that came up that were the obvious clear winners. Yeah, if we progress this a little more, we can get a visual example of that. Or, and also start identifying potential questions to be addressed with subsequent programs if we know it's going to kind of fall outside the scope of that program. From an example standpoint, in 3 programs, we had over 900 engagements. And those engagements, we don't mean kind of landing page views, but actual kind of questions asked and upvotes of questions that folks saw on those keyboards. So we've really seen a lot of impact from this, and it's really helped sharpen the educational delivery of the programs. Going into the live day and kind of through our actual core platform, we actively encourage in our programs the submission of anonymous questions. It's kind of baked into the player and the application itself. And that, of course, is tracked, it's added, it's part of the measurement of what we're doing, but there's also the kind of the Q&A elements. So that really help the audience stay engaged. And in the future state of a program, when we break it down into smaller segments, it allows us to really provide actionable kind of tips and tricks type of segments that we put out to and either get additional engagement on specific topics or actually re-engage audience members who might have left off at a certain point. We're measuring everything and we're leveraging that for outcomes. So finally, on the putting it all together, and as I said, measuring it all, we have the pre-test. As we push the animations forward a little bit, we do a pre-test, we do a post-test and evaluation, whether it's CME or patient education. In patient education, give your audience the credit to understand that, yes, there may be people who are at a very low health literacy level, but they can still progress. But you got to give them the milestones to show it. And 8 weeks for those who are able to participate subsequent to that. Final points from us: keeping it win-win. Giving your best to a foundation partner or a patient advocacy organization means you also offer them an opportunity for growth, whether it's out there in thought leadership or growing their membership by the way you distribute your programs, and simply giving people a reason to engage that organization. Much like Sarah said at the beginning, a lot of people are not necessarily engaging foundations when they should be today. So reduce their heavy lifting, be precise, help them kind of go after their core needs, and provide digital and visual support where you can. I have a highlight video, by the way. It wasn't playing well today, so Derek.
Yeah, we'll try to post a link on our agenda page.
It's an example
for this. I'll put this up there. Catherine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my concluding slides so everyone can see, and then I'm going to let Alan finish his up for the archive version of it. Scott will probably cut us off, but that's fine. We can just keep going. And then at least it'll be on the archive part of it, so people can watch it if they watch the replay as well. So let me do my quick ending slides, which are basically, please take our survey if you have a chance. And remember, this is a 2-day program this year, so we're back again tomorrow as well. But it is helpful for us, and we also want to know what you think of the 2-day versus the 1 day as we used to do. And then, just so you know, the next session coming up at noon is Fear Not the Force, 20 predictions 5 years later. I'm told there may be costumes involved. I don't know. You'll have to tune in to find out, I guess. Okay, great. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Scott will probably be replacing this one, and you can click refresh to watch the next session. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alan if you want to finish up where you were, and then at least we'll have that for the archive.
So, thank you.
Sure.
And are we off with your folks now?
Well, we're still kind of live. It'll go off eventually, but everyone who watches the archive version of this will be able to see what's continuing on. So,
gotcha.
At least a semi-professional or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, what happened? I'm confused as to even what happened.
Well, your audio started cutting in and out, and then all of a sudden we didn't hear you at all, and you clearly weren't hearing us at all. And then you even your box went away, and then you came back, and you were still talking, and I'd already gone over to Christian. So I'm not sure what happened, but apparently your internet must have cut out. But you seem good now, so
sorry about that.
We can take it from.
I was not advised.
No, that's okay. It happens. There are glitches along the way. You want to try sharing your slides again?
Sure. What's that? Can you see my screen, and can you see it descending into the abyss?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I.
There we go. Yeah.
All right, let's try again. I'm gonna maybe jump off this and jump back on, see if that helps us. Oh, I can't hear anything from y'all. Okay. I'll be back.
Derek, while we're waiting, how do we join the next session?
Wonder if we've been cut off for the next.
Yeah, I think we're transitioning out. Derek seems to have locked up, so I think they're preparing the transition from this to the next.
I think we can log off.
Yeah, no, let's. Oh, Alan's back.
Hi.
Hey, Alan. We'll all
Wow, this is like
Yeah, I think Derek is gone.
okay. Well, what a nightmare. I have a thought. I could record audio for the whole darn thing and send my slides. And that way, I mean, and I could not cough and it'll be lovely. How about that?
We can archive that. That would be fine.
Well, I'm going to go cry softly in a closet. But thank you all.
All right, thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.